It's a blow to opponents of a controversial oil industry project. A joint review panel has stated that there is no moratorium on tanker traffic along the BC coast. Now, this is the latest development in the battle over the Northern Gateway Pipeline project, a proposal to transport crude oil from Alberta to the west coast. Eric Swanson has been working to put the brakes on this plan. He is the corporate campaigner with the Dogwood initiative, and he's here in the studio this afternoon. Hello, Eric.
Hello.
Okay, let's start with a little bit of background on this round, because this story is certainly not new. Who exactly has stated that there is no moratorium on tanker traffic off the BC coast?
Okay, so this is why it is in fact not a blow to the campaign. It is the Joint Review Panel, or the National Energy Board, so the government's regulatory body, which has been tasked as of early December to review the pipeline and tanker project to BC's coast.
But does it not make a difference that they see that there is they're not going to look at the question of moratorium? They say that's not in their area of purview. Does that not make this more difficult? I mean, do you then have to argue that there is a moratorium?
No, because it shouldn't be the jurisdiction of a regulatory body to discuss political issues like this. And this is the problem we see with the Joint Review Panel process, because it does not ask the big questions. It's essentially a process of small details considered independently. So the declaration that there is no moratorium on tanker traffic is in fact consistent with what Conservative politicians have been saying for the past 2 years. Gary Lunn in Victoria, Harper, other ministers have all declared that there is no moratorium on tanker traffic, against the longstanding understanding of a lot of British Columbians. So the issue isn't whether is there a moratorium, because that's going to depend on who you're talking to. The issue is 72% of British Columbians want a ban on tankers. So how are we going to do that? And the answer is through legislation, and that's what we're seeking here. And this announcement from the National Energy Board doesn't factor into that.
Maybe then, based on what I hear you saying, there's an advantage in having it be clearly stated for the record and on the table? Very
much so. It hasn't been a secret by any means that the Conservatives support or the oil pipeline and oil tanker traffic. But every time they make that more clear is helpful for British Columbians, because of all the issues that I've been dealing with and that my colleagues have been dealing with, this moratorium issue has been one of the most confusing.
Oh, look, I have a file that's so thick on this. I mean, 72, 89, private members' bills. I mean, this is not, that's why I'm finding it rather interesting that the fact that there is someone who's come out and said there is no moratorium. I could bring someone into studio this afternoon. We talked about this, say there is a moratorium. I mean, that debate seems to go on, but you're just as happy to have it sort of that this government does not believe there is one.
This government doesn't believe it. So let's put that debate aside. Let's stop talking about the past and talk about the future and what British Columbians want for their coast and for the rivers up in the north. And is it oil pipelines and tankers and the consequent spills or not? And if that sentiment holds, and we know through polling that it has held since 1972, then let's clarify this once and for all. Let's get some law. Let's get the federal political parties to work together, or to work independent of the Conservatives, to ban tankers on the coast once and for all, so we can move on to other issues.
In the meantime, this panel is going to go ahead. This joint review panel. What are they going to look at?
The Joint Review Panel is tasked to look at the environmental effects and the need and necessity of the project. And the big problem with the review, I've got an opinion, everybody's got an opinion on this, but if we wanted to have a fulsome debate, let's start above the regulatory review. Let's ask some big picture questions. Are British Columbians okay with Canadian oil being sent to Asia, for example? Are they okay that we don't have a national energy plan? Are they okay with the risk of an Exxon Valdez oil spill? Are they okay with the continual infringement of Aboriginal title and rights that this pipeline and tanker project would bring? Are they okay that Alberta's oil industry sees this project as leverage against U.S. climate change legislation in the context of efforts here in BC to actually deal with climate change?
But as you know, that debate will go on. In the meantime, this review panel will be looking at environmental issues. we will need some of those questions answered in terms of straight environmental facts and figures. Isn't it possible that they could come up with something that said environmentally, you would love to hear them say that environmentally this is not a good project. Wouldn't that stop it right there?
Depending on the minister's position after that recommendation. Yes, that would be great. Everybody loves to know the nitty-gritty details and the environmental impacts and what can and cannot be done. First, we have to decide if we should be talking about it at all, because these things cost a lot of money. Mm-hmm. They take a lot of time, a lot of people's energy and resources. So it would make sense to me, and certainly to even Enbridge's CEO has argued that we need a two-step review. One, to first talk about whether we need this project at all, and then we can get into the details.
If there is such a strong belief, as you say, in support for a moratorium, if it's 72%, and again, that someone would come in and argue these numbers, but let's assume for a minute that 72% of British Columbians support a moratorium. Why isn't there one?
Because our political representatives have been comfortable in the past, in the absence of an actual active project, to just kind of let that debate sit. Now we have an urgency created by a fresh proposal. And we have a Conservative government that doesn't recognize the moratorium that we've been talking about. So we've got this new, fresh political situation where we potentially have the Liberal Party of Canada, the NDP, the Greens certainly on side with an oil tanker moratorium, and the Conservatives not. So we have an opportunity here, in Victoria, the Lower Mainland, elsewhere in BC, to get the parties that have in the past been strong on tankers, against tankers, the Liberals, the NDP, to align such that we finally get some clarity on this once and for all.
You, no doubt, have heard that the other side of this argument is that there is a safe way to bring that kind of economic development to the north. I mean, a place like Kitimat that has seen a lot of job losses could see this as a great possibility. Is it that black and white for you, that it is the project goes or the project doesn't go?
Yes, it is black and white, because one reason. Communities that need jobs, people that need employment for their lives and their livelihoods. There's infinite ways to create that from the government's perspective. That's what our government is supposed to do, to look at all of the options, to provide opportunities for communities, to weigh them, and to put forward the best proposals. This has not happened with this project. The federal government, has not come to the people of British Columbia and said, okay, we can do it. We can have a tanker project, or we can have more green energy development, or we can have this or that or this. Let's talk about where we want to be, and then let's talk details. That hasn't happened. So it seems obvious to me that an oil tanker project spills related to the tar sands issue and climate change and Aboriginal title and rights, negative impacts over all these areas. Let's focus on some of the better ideas first. And as far as safety goes, everything's safe until you have an accident. Mm-hmm. And that's what we saw with the Valdez. Actually, an escort tug grounded up where the Valdez grounded just a couple weeks ago. And these escort tugs are one of the safety measures that is being claimed for this project. So everything's safe until an accident happens and everybody looks for someone to blame. And I'd rather avoid that and potentially get on with better projects.
So we've just got a few seconds left. What's the next step then? We've heard from the Joint Review Panel. Where does this go next? Very briefly.
We need a legislated tanker ban. The Liberals in the 2008 election supported this. We need people in the Lower Mainland to contact Hetty Fry, Joyce Murray, Ujjal Dosanjh, Suk Dhaliwal, Keith Martin here, Liberal MPs. Tell them you support a tanker ban, and hopefully the Liberals can work with the NDP and we can finally have something.
Thanks very much for coming in, Eric.
My pleasure.
Eric Swanson is the corporate campaigner with the Dogwood Initiative.